Hello, and welcome to my video on the January 2019 Algebra 2 Regions question number 36. In this problem, we're asked to solve the given equation algebraically for all values of x, and we see our equation. And in our particular equation, we see a radical, so this is an example of our radical equation. When we go to try and solve for a radical equation, the first thing that we typically want to do is to try to isolate the radical. And we definitely would want to continue to try to do that in this problem here. So since 2x is being subtracted from the radical, we can add 2x to both sides here to start the process, and we would have 3 radical x equals to 2x minus 5. Now, again, to be consistent with what we typically did to isolate the radical, you may think that dividing both sides by 3 would be the next thing to do. And while you could proceed in that manner, if we do divide both sides by 3, on the right side of our equation, we're going to have fractions. We're going to have 2x over 3 and 5 over 3, and those fractions in our equation. And I would rather try to avoid having those fractions. So what you can do at this point, since the radical is pretty much isolated, except for this 3 being multiplied to it, to get rid of the radical, remember that we would square both sides. So if we're careful about how we square both sides here, which I'll do in red. So if we're careful with how we square both sides, we can navigate our way through this to come up with our answer. Meaning that on the left side, when we square the left side, both the 3 and the square root of x need to be squared because they're being multiplied together. And 3 squared would give us just 9, and the square root of x squared just gives us x, right? Because the radical gets eliminated when we square it. On the right side, however, since we have a binomial term, because we're subtracting 5 from 2x, we have to write that out twice, and then we have to actually distribute out the 2x minus 5. And when we do that, we would get 4x squared minus 10x minus 10x, and then minus 5 times minus 5 would give us plus 25. And we would then get 9x equaling 4x squared minus 20x plus 25. And now, as is typical with our quadratic equation, we'd want to get our equation equal to 0, which we could do by subtracting both sides by 9x. And when we subtract 9x from the right-hand side, we would get minus 29x. And now that our quadratic equation is set equal to 0, we can try to solve by factoring. And because 4 is not 1, this coefficient of x squared is not 1, we would perhaps use the AC method of factoring, and 4 times 25 would give us 100, and two terms that would multiply to 100 but yet add up to negative 29 would be negative 25 and negative 4. So we split up that middle term as negative 25x minus 4x, and then we just bring down the 4x squared, we bring down the plus 25, and then we factor by grouping the 4 terms here. So the first 2 terms, they would have a GCF of x, leaving us with 4x minus 25. And the last 2 terms, especially because the leading term here is a negative, we would perhaps just want to pull out a minus 1, and then we would have 4x minus 25 left over. And then now I'll perhaps continue this over here. When we continue our factor by grouping, since 4x minus 25 is the same factor in both parentheses, we can pull that out. And then we would have left over, here x, and minus 1 left over from the second pair of terms. And now that we have this factored, we can solve. And the second factor here, I think you would hopefully agree that the solution there would be x equals to 1. But the second factor, we can set that factor equal to 0. And if we solve for x, we would get that x equals to 25 over 4. And we have the two solutions here of 25 over 4 and 1. But remember, with a radical equation, you would want to check your answers. And in particular, when we plug 1 into our equation here, right, if we do that, we would have 3 square root 1 minus 2 times 1. Does that equal to -5? And 3 minus 2, unfortunately, that does not equal to -5. So we need to reject the answer of x equals to 1. If we do the same thing for x equals to 25 over 4, if we plug that into our equation, I think you'll find that the equation will check out, but I'll just quickly do that here. Right? We plug in negative 20, when we plug in 25 over 4 in for x, does this equation hold? And 3 times the square root of 25 over 4 would give us 3 times 5 over 2. And then this would be minus, simplified, this would be minus 25 over 2. Does that equal to -5? And this would be 15 over 2 minus 25 over 2, which does equal to -5. And that's why we would accept the answer 25 over 4. So I hope that this video helped you out with this particular problem. As always, good luck with all your studies, and thank you for watching. Take care.